Good morning. I just want to clear up the little confusion around the program. I had written the poem that Lynn read on the banyan tree a couple of years ago, and I read it to my friends, Steve and Kathy Pagano, and Steve liked it so much that he decided he was going to write a song based on my poem. So what you have in the program is actually the song itself. So that, and then not only did he write the song, but he did a virtual chorus with the song and took pictures of banyan trees. So we are going to be treated at the end of my talk to about a 3-minute video on the root lessons. And Steve, in doing his research on the banyan tree, found another way to describe it, which is the tree that walks. So that was not in my original poem. But Steve and I thought it would be a good idea for you to hear my original poem and the song that the poem is based on. So the tree that walks, I'm going to explain a lot about what that means and why that's so important. So I created the whole metaphor of the banyan tree when I was finishing my Gestalt training. It was a 3-year program, postdoc, 3-year program to become a certified Gestalt therapist. And we were supposed to take some aspect of Gestalt therapy and challenge it, make it our own, just work with it, embellish it, add to it. And I took umbrage at the great Fritz Perls. I don't know if you've ever heard of Fritz Perls. He was very, very famous at one time. He said the nature of maturity is moving from environmental support to self-support. And I didn't know what he meant by that self-support, because most people think of self-support in terms of self-reliance. And this is not about self-reliance. Self-reliance is impossible. Even 400 years ago, John Donne said, "No man is an island." Excuse the sexism. No person is an island. 400 years ago exactly, he wrote that poem, 1624. And he was being a little political too, because he was talking against isolationism in the world. But here today we're going to be looking at social isolation and how incredibly destructive and damaging it is. So when I did my colloquy for the Gestalt, it was called a colloquy, it was a 3-hour presentation, I challenged Fritz Perls talking about self-support. And I said, if you define self-support as reaching out for help, healthy help, not enabling, not to be enabling, not to be enabled, but to ask to be coached and taught and guided. Self-support means I use my own rich inner resources as well as reaching out to the external resources like libraries. Remember, libraries, when we didn't learn everything online, and wonderful people in our lives who would care about us, know us. Whatever that is, I wanted to make the point. And when Spence and I went to Florida, I only saw a banyan tree as an adult because they're tropical. But I was so incredibly impressed. If you know anything about them, and you're going to see pictures of them, they can grow a mile wide. And that's why they're called the tree that walks. And as I explained in my poem, the reason that they do is that they take their branches and they throw branches, roots down from their branches to touch the soil, which gives them further support. So if you imagine yourself walking forward in life, because we all have fear, and fear is the most prevalent emotion, the most base emotion. And Abraham Maslow said that human beings are capable of being self-actualized, meaning reaching our full potential, our full capacity as human beings. Justice, caring about the world, community, kindness, growth, learning. And he said that it is inherent to human beings to be growthful. It is a part of our DNA to want to grow. Yet a fraction of human beings are self-actualized. So how is that possible? Because of the fear of the unknown. And inertia creates stagnation, fear. So as I learned in therapy in my earlier adulthood, if you want to go forward, you go forward with support. The idea is healthy support and not being enabled. So there is, just as there's a confusion about the difference between self-sufficiency and self-support, there's a confusion about helping. And are you enabling someone if you're helping someone? In fact, when codependent, the term, became popularized around the 50s, first it started with co-alcoholic, people who were dependent upon people who were dependent upon alcohol. And it morphed into someone who, well, you tell me, when you hear the term codependent, what do you hear? What do you know that means, a codependent? I know you know. Yeah. David.
Sort of the opposite of self-support. You're depending for your well-being on someone else's input.
Depending for your well-being on someone else's input. Yes. Does anybody want to add to that? Rick? Yeah.
Both partners are depending on the other one.
Yes. Oh, that's interdependence. That's what we want to make a difference. We want to understand that distinction. Yes, thanks, Rick. Someone else wanted to say something? Oh, Lynn.
Codependent sounds negative.
Yes, and it is. Codependence is negative because what it means is that I am putting all of my eggs in your basket. I am putting my self-esteem in your pocket and asking you to dole it out to me. And if you think that I'm okay, then I'm okay. And if I don't think, if you don't think I'm okay, then I'm not okay. Yeah, Lorraine.
Would codependency be symbiotic?
Yes, a symbiotic, that's a term that's usually used for plant life. Sometimes it's actually symbiotic is more mutual. So as opposed to in psychology, it's called a confluence. You know, people are held together with crazy glue, right? We call it enmeshment. But the idea is, I think I am nothing without you, and without you, I collapse. And I cannot tolerate any kind of separation or conflict. So I try to keep peace. And if we look at what the counterdependent is, I'll just explain that as well, or you'll help me explain it in a minute, because they have similarities and of course they have differences. So codependent example, some of you may have seen The Twilight Zone. there was an episode where a man was madly in love with his neighbor, a beautiful woman. She wouldn't give him a tumble. So he finds this old apothecary shop. This old dusty old shop, like nobody's in it. It's all like antique-y looking. And he says, "Do you have like a love potion?" Some of you saw it. I want this woman to fall in love with me. And I want so much for her to love me. Oh, yes, we do. Oh my God, how much is it? $1. I can't believe it. $1? So he purchases it and he invites her over and he sneaks it into her drink. And then she is so in love with him, clingy and clawing, and the sun rises and sets on him. And even when he dares to leave the house, she's in his apartment smelling and holding his clothes. So he can't stand it anymore. So he goes back to the shop. And listen, I need something to reverse the lotion, the love potion. And, oh yeah, we have something. Oh, good, thank goodness. How much is it? $1,000. It's funny, I must have seen that episode like 50 years ago or something, but I was so struck by it. So of course, yes, codependency is negative because it's one-sided. And there's another, I'm thinking about the movie War of the Roses. Do you remember that? Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. And they're both in law school, but she decides to quit law school to devote her life to him. He becomes a successful lawyer, and she does everything to make his life better. She creates the most gorgeous house, all of this. And then after she does all that, and he's a made man, he decides to leave her. So, and then if you ever saw the movie, it ends with them, the chandelier falling down. They have literally destroyed each other and destroyed the whole house. So that is one-sided devotion, right? Imagine if he would have said, "Okay, I've gotten my degree now. It's time for you to go back to school. And let me develop you. Let me help you." But no. And hell hath no wrath more than a woman scorned, right? So really, really ends in kind of really violence. Speaking about violence, it reminded me our quiet time, the 2 minutes of quiet time. It's a form of meditation. There are more advanced forms of meditation. But the Dalai Lama said that if children learn by the time they're 8 years old to meditate, there would be no more violence in the world. Because what meditation does is it gives us access to our executive brain, our prefrontal lobe. And we have a way of, with our prefrontal lobe, the human brain, the higher self, we have a way of mediating those very distressful emotions, the fear, the anger, the grief, and not moving into resentment, because unprocessed fear is, according to Tara Brach, the cause of violence. Unprocessed fear is the cause of violence in the whole world. So, what about counterdependence? That's not a word in the vernacular. That's not a word that's bandied about, thrown about. So what do you think a counterdependent person?
Repeat whatever they say.
Okay. What do you think a counterdependent person is? Just take a guess. Counterdependent. Alienated, yeah. Alienated from the world, from others, and also alienated from the self. So codependency and counterdependency are two sides of a spectrum. They're polarities. And they both come from trauma. They both come from people being very, very hurt and trying to mediate the hurt, trying to deal with their pain, trying to protect themselves. And like all adjustments, adaptations, it's called the adapted child, so that we are all born as what's called the natural child. We are all born with a capacity for great playfulness and zest and kindness and vitality and love and connection. The way you see children, exploring the world, being curious, caring, being innocent. We're all born that way. Most of us are, if we're lucky. Most human beings are born with that capacity. But then what happens is we live in far less perfect environments, so we have to adapt. And adaptation is what is important. It has created success for the human race. Because we're able to adapt, we were able to create clothing. We didn't have the claws and the fangs, but we have the brain, the prefrontal lobe, the ability to change when circumstances change, create new solutions. So being able to adapt is a very healthy thing. However, when we learn to adapt as children to trauma or to a very painful environment, it works at the time, but it doesn't work in adulthood if we want to be mature adults. So what are some adaptations? Children should be seen and not heard, right? And you think, oh, that's just in a textbook. I know people who were actually told children should be seen and not heard. Don't trust untrustworthy people. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? But what if you want an intimate relationship as an adult? It's very smart not to trust untrustworthy people. But if you have a person who wants to love you, who is reasonably trustworthy, as we flawed human beings can be, it's good to learn. It's good to be able to trust. There's a Chinese proverb that goes, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. As the twig is bent, so grows the tree. So over the decades as a psychotherapist, when my clients come to me, the first things I hear always is, oh, I can't stand myself, I can't stand this, I'm an adult, I'm not a child anymore, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I shouldn't be doing this stuff. And I explain to them that, yeah, easy to say, but the counterintuitiveness, what goes against the grain is that we have to learn to love those parts of ourselves that are acting badly, acting out. Like, when I first went to Overeaters Anonymous, because I was a food addict, I hated myself for compulsively overeating. And then I went to therapy for it, and honor the symptoms, they said. Honor the symptoms. What does that mean? Honor the symptoms. But I had to learn to understand what triggered me into compulsive eating and to have compassion for myself and to understand that it was not an ice cream sundae that I really wanted. It was a family Sunday. I came from a proverbial dysfunctional background. Both my parents were alcoholic. There was violence in my home. I was afraid of my father. I married the first man who asked me at 18 to get out of my violent home. And after the wedding ceremony, I cried, not tears of joy, but tears of relief, because my father couldn't hit me anymore. So I know what it's like to have pain, and I know what it's like to be in a world where you don't feel that people know or care or can help with that kind of pain. So what do? We go to those addictions. We go to those hidden dependencies. Now, this is a pretty tough spot we are in as Americans, because we are an individualistic nation, and we are actually considered the most individualistic nation in the world. And having said that, I want to say that I am an individualist. I believe that each person has the right to follow their own dream, dance to their own tune, beat their own drum, follow their dreams. And I am an individualist, and I will always be an individualist, to find the unique you and live your life according to your choices. However, there's toxic individualism to the extreme, which is, if you have a need, what are you labeled? I have a need. I am needy, right? Which is pejorative. Now, the problem is that these needs become extreme when they're not fulfilled, as they should have been fulfilled developmentally. When the infant, the toddler, the child is seen and directed and guided with loving eyes, that the child knows they are welcomed in the world and they are delighted in, and they are mirrored back with love and respect. They have a sense of, I am lovable. And this sense of lovableness becomes part of them. It becomes internalized. If you don't have that, it's pretty hard. I didn't have that. And I often felt empty. And it's very hard to describe emptiness. I never really understood what it was and why people felt it. And I've come to understand that the emptiness is about not feeling connected, not only not with others, but not feeling connected with self. So the child that is unseen, unreflected, with eyes of delight, is not able, that's too strong there, they are hardly able to be self-reflective. And Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined life is not worth living. So what does it mean to be self-reflective? It means I can step outside of myself and I can witness myself and witness my behavior as more of a coach rather than a critic, more of a loving, nurturing parent rather than a harsh critic. And I can say to myself, Duffy, how come you acted less than your higher self? And if I ask that question, I get the answer. Most adults in our society live above their necks. We're taught to kind of not think much about our bodies. Okay, once in a while we visit our genitals, but basically The mature American is supposed to be a walking head. And when I ask my clients, when they say, you know, I'm miserable, I feel furious, angry, where is that in your body? Oh, I don't know, I just think it. Well, where is it in your body? Oh, it's in my chest, my jaw, my throat. And what is your chest, jaw, throat saying to you? What's the problem? Why does it hurt? What hurts so much? And that's the beginning of self-reflection. That's the beginning of what we call mind-body work, the connection between the mind and the body. But again, we are taught as mature adults to be relatively disembodied. So therefore, we can experience anxiety but not know it because we're used to it. We act it out. So I don't know the statistics on this. I don't know the numbers. But I do know that codependence, the idea of living your life through other people and what do other people think of me, and that's all I care about, that's the measure of my worth, what do other people think of me, is very, very common. And if you look at all the love songs, I'm nobody until somebody loves me, and I need you for my sustenance. Well, the thing is, we do need each other for our sustenance. It's really a matter of extremes and balance. So if you look at someone who is over-responsible for someone else, like the codependent, and what the codependents do, if they don't feel loved as an individual just for being them, they say, well, I can't make you love me, but I can take care of you. I can meet your needs. And then you won't leave me because I have met your needs. And that helps me deal with my fear of abandonment. So I can flip it. And I become the fixer and the rescuer and the person who devotes all of your needs at the expense of my needs. Okay? So remember the ethical version of our ethical version of the golden rule. Some of you know it, some of you don't. Act so as to elicit the best in the other, and in so doing, elicit the best in yourself. Okay? Act as to elicit the best in the other, and in so doing, elicit the best in yourself. Now, if you notice, we put the group in front of the other in front of ourselves. That's kind of like being a saint. You know, St. Francis of Assisi, seek first to love and then be loved. Seek first to forgive and then be forgiven. So kind of the accent is on the wrong syllable. And it is counterintuitive because it's like, but I want you to understand me. No, let me interrupt you because you don't understand me. I want you to understand me. And St. Francis says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And I try to be a saint, saintly. I really try. So we have the commonality of codependence. And are you aware that there is a 12-step program called Codependence Anonymous? Did you know that? It's very, very popular. And the only requirement for membership is a desire for healthy, loving relationships. I think everybody, we should all join Codependence Anonymous. It's free. And all the 12-step programs are free, and thank goodness I found 12-step programs. The other day, Spence and I went into Brooklyn to see a play that Arthur and Lynn's grandson, Ryan Dobrin, directed, and it was called the voices inside our head. The voices inside our head. And it was the most interesting thing. It was a relatively small room. It was in a church. And all the audience members sat in a circle. And suddenly the play starts with the actors in the circle being members of a support group about grief, about dealing with grief. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I talked to Ryan about it, and then he told me about how big the playwright was on this concept called third space. So I had not heard the term. Has anybody heard the term third space? I had not heard the term. So I went, he said, the playwright is here. So I had a conversation with the playwright. And the third space is about beyond work and home, there are third spaces. Libraries, community centers, 12-step groups, beauty salons, gyms, that there are places that we can go beyond home and work to choose who we want to be, to find out new identities, and to expand ourselves. So I personally, as I confessed, have learned codependency. Some people say that codependency is like boot camp for females. Females grow up in codependency boot camp. You know, the need to please, the need to be nice. And Carol Gilligan talked years ago about women's fear of no intimacy and men's fear of intimacy, and there is the counterdependent. So if you can relate to either of this, the counterdependent either has been engulfed or has been neglected. And by the way, engulfment is neglecting. It is emotionally neglecting, because if I look to you to satisfy all my needs as the parent, and I smother you, that is emotionally neglecting you. So that person doesn't want anything to do with intimacy. Intimacy is a double-edged sword. We want it, we need it. It's love. We need love. It nourishes us. And yet we want it, yet we're so afraid, so many of us, of intimacy. So what do we do with that? Interdependence naturally means mutual help. I help you, you help me, we support each other. Act so as to bring out the best in the other, and so yourself. Yet that can be very scary if I don't think I'm okay. If I don't think I'm okay and I, quote unquote, build you up, you might leave me. So I don't want you to do that. So where did Spence and I manage on our journey? You know, interdependence, striving for it, we have to have a vision. We have to believe that it's possible. In motivation theory, there are two components. What causes motivation, someone to be motivated? Number one, it has to be important. Number two, it has to be possible. So if something is important to me, but I don't think it's possible, I'm not motivated. If I can do something, but it's not important to me, I'm not motivated. So if you can relate it all to the concepts of codependent and counterdependent, and you want to move into interdependence, which is the only kind of healthy, loving relationship, it takes a lot of strength. It takes the belief that it's possible. It takes a sense of vision, ideally, it takes literally witnessing healthy interdependent relationships where each person really actively is helping the other person develop and is kind to them. And I was reading Mark Nepo, I don't even know if it's pronounced Nepo or Nepo, but in his, it's called the Book of Awakening, he was writing on unconditional love. And he said, you know, there's a confusion about what unconditional love is. It is not passively turning the other cheek. Unconditional love is accepting your loved one's flaws, but not necessarily their behavior. So, how do we stand up for ourselves with love? I love you, but I will not accept disrespect. I love you, but I am leaving now, and I'm not going to ask you what you want for dinner. I am not going to try to fix it. Because when people feel threatened, as you know, we move into fight, flight, freeze, we do nothing, or fawn, belly up, do whatever you want with me, I surrender, I'll let you treat me any way you want so you don't leave me. So fixing is a form of fawning. No, I'm not going to make you dinner because I didn't like the way you talked to me. So I accept your flaws, but I challenge you to be better. Now, there is no such thing as Counterdependence Anonymous. Nobody is interested. And that's the whole point. It is very hard to treat counterdependency because that person has been so traumatized that intimacy is so frightening that I am going to just abstain from intimacy. I'd love it, but it's too scary. Plus, I'm not even in touch with my own needs for intimacy. Sometimes the codependent and the counterdependent marry. And it's usually the women who are I have male clients who are codependent, female clients who are counterdependent, but there is a gender split very much. And sometimes the counterdependent can be blasted out of their counterdependency if there's a threat of loss of their loved one. If someone almost dies, if someone says, I love you, but I can't live this way any longer. So we are really challenged to be interdependent, which is quite messy. Spence, I told you about in my last talk how Spence literally helped me, supported me in getting a PhD, even though he was afraid that he would lose me, that he wouldn't be privy to certain circles, and that was 37 years ago. But here's a messier version of interdependence. Remember the idea, I want to elicit the best in you, and in so doing, me. It was about 25 years ago, and I was still very actively involved in my career, and at the time I was doing a lot of professional speaking, and I was invited to speak at the National Speakers Association. And there couldn't have been a bigger feather in a cap for a professional speaker to be invited to speak to an audience of 400 professional speakers. I was out of my mind with fear, but of course I said yes. It just happened to coincide with our niece's wedding. It was in Colorado. I tried everything. I called up every airline. I did everything I could. There was not a single way I could do both. And I was very unhappy about it, but I did prioritize my career. Spence was very unhappy about it. And he was very hurt and very angry, rightly so, a family wedding. And what is the antidote to something like that when you're striving for development for your partner as well as yourself? Empathy. The antidote was empathy, that I really, really got how hurt Spence was and how much he wanted me to be at that family wedding and how much I wanted to be at that family wedding. And how much it meant to him and how much it meant to me. And they were different. They were different needs. So interdependence, healthy interdependency is the only way to be truly intimate. It's not one up, one down. We cannot have one up, one down, playing one-upsmanship in relationships and be truly intimate. We cannot. Notions of superiority, inferiority are murky and ugly, and they're not real. So here are two equal people, as Cahill Gurbrand said, stand apart, two columns holding up the temple, and be together, but let there be spaces in your togetherness. And when I think about popular music, I mentioned it before. Remember Barbra Streisand and Neil Diamond, their song, "You Don't Bring Me Flowers"? How popular that was. And of course, the mega hit, "I Can Buy Myself Flowers." Okay? So we go from that, I can buy myself flowers. We go from codependency or wanting and needing to, no thank you, I'm counterdependent, I'll do it myself, I don't need you. To giving each other flowers, better yet, planting flowers together. And to use another tree metaphor, you think I like trees, as a Chinese proverb goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is today. So have the courage to be yourself and stand up for yourself and reach out in healthy support.
Wow. Extemporaneously, too. Wow. Okay. We'll have the second piece of music now. We'll have the second piece of music now. Oh, you want the second piece now? Okay. Wonderful.
Steve, will you please stand up?
Yeah, Steve.
Steve Pagano, who wrote
Steve.
the song based upon my poem, and we're going to watch the video that he created.
Your branches extend far and wide. For nurture and support, the tree that walks. To spread your roots under and beyond. Intricate latticework. Build your breath into meaning, it grows, grows, grows. A tree that walks, it will shelter, it will protect, it will sustain. You and I, we can be the banyan tree, the banyan tree, the banyan tree, banyan tree, banyan tree, banyan tree, banyan tree. The tree that walks. The tree that walks. The banyan tree, 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 banyan